We are now heading into week 7 fantasy football, which means by this time, the buy low window on multiple guys has really closed up on most guys, all right? But that doesn't mean that you can't still make moves in fantasy football before week 7 that are going to make your team so much better through the trade market. So we're going to go through 5 trade targets that you need to buy before week 7 fantasy football. And I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for that and beyond. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now get into our first guy right here. I really like trading for Wan'Dale Robinson right now if he is not on your waiver wire. Now I think that's the first thing that we need to make clear is you need to go to your league right now, type in Wan'Dale Robinson, make sure you add that little apostrophe, bing, and make sure that he's not on your waiver wire, because if he is on your waiver wire, you need to make sure you grab him, because I believe this guy has long-standing value throughout the rest of the season. So Wan'Dale Robinson plays for the New York Giants. He plays on Thursday night against the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind here. Number one, Malik Neighbors is out, but he's out for the duration of the season, so that already means that Wan'Dale Robinson shoots up that depth chart, and he will stay there for basically the majority of the season, if not all of it. Now, the number 2 thing that I do think is absolutely worth noting here is that Darius Slayton was also out as well. Now, I think Darius Slayton probably is going to serve a lot of times as their more downfield option who's getting a lot of over-the-middle stuff, a lot of intermediate stuff within 10 to 15 yards. I don't think that's Wan'Dale's game. I think that's more of Darius Slayton's game. But Wan'Dale Robinson came out here against the Philadelphia Eagles. 6 catches on 7 targets for 84 yards and a touchdown. Now, I think the biggest thing and the reason why I like Wan'Dale so much is because at this point, we've seen enough of Jackson Dart in particular to understand that this guy is here to stay, and he is here to do very well in fantasy for us. And I think he will continue to provide pass catching upside to their other options. So in the event that Darius Slayton gets back to you, I think that could be baked into a trade with somebody on Wan'Dale Robinson. And I think there's a very particularly great opportunity here to sell on a guy that has way higher name value, but in reality, I don't really think is actually a better fantasy asset. So the trade idea I actually have for this one just off the bat is Marvin Harrison and Breece Hall for Wan'Dale Robinson and Kyren Williams. Now let me walk through this one for you. I think that trading Marvin for Wan'Dale straight up is a fine idea. I would not be bothered if you did that. But the only reason I would be a little bit bothered is because I think you're leaving meat on the bone here. And that's why I want to include a guy like Breece Hall into this operation and get Kyren away from him. Because in most leagues, everybody knows who Marvin Harrison Jr. is, right? Son of a Hall of Famer, massive draft capital attached to the guy both in NFL and in fantasy football drafts. Now, this guy, I don't think, is going to be much better than what we've seen from him through the first year and a half of his career, which has been boom or bust, mostly bust, and has the occasional volatile game. I think that's what Marvin is. And I would much rather take the consistency with the better quarterback, which is Jackson Dart, and a wide receiver who's going to continue to be very important for this offense right here. But at the same time, you want to take advantage of that name value that Marvin has and get a guy like Kyren Williams when you add in Breece to this trade. Because Breece Hall, everybody knows him as well, and he's a really good player, but he's just on a bad offense. And I think most people understand Kyren Williams is the better fantasy option than Breece Hall. But what you could do here is get Kyren in this trade because people will feel like they're getting an upgrade with Marvin Harrison Jr. over Wan'Dale Robinson. This to me feels like a winning move for a lot of teams in fantasy before week 7. Now getting into our next guy right here. This guy just had a bye week, so obviously he's going under the radar right now a little bit, and I don't think that his season has been as good as it can be. And I'm talking about Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Now, I think with Nico Collins, there's a couple of very important things to highlight here. Nico Collins was a first or second round draft pick in fantasy football drafts because the ceiling on this guy is very, very high on a per game basis. And even right now, he's not bad. It's just not what we've expected. He's getting 14 fantasy points per game in a full PPR format. He's had one game with more than 20 points, but the reality is that he's had 3 touchdowns because he's an electric player. And I think that Nico Collins, that's the one thing people need to remember, is that only once this year has he eclipsed 10 targets in one game, but even on that limited work, sometimes 5 targets, sometimes 6 targets, sometimes 8 targets. I think it's very important to note that this guy has been very efficient on everything that he's been given. Right now, Nico is averaging 14.2 yards per reception, and that shows this guy's run after the catch ability and his route running ability down the field. And Nico Collins is playing with a quarterback that, as much crap as I want to give him, and I think it's well deserved for a lot of the season, I do believe CJ Stroud is definitely an above average quarterback in the NFL. And I do think that Nico Collins is still clearly the number one wide receiver and number one option in this offense. You've got a split backfield with Nick Chubb and Woody Marks. You've got a bunch of receivers that are just not evolving. I think Nico Collins still clearly is the wide receiver one. So right now, after a bye week, he's the wide receiver 28 in fantasy football. I think there's a window here that we could buy him. So the idea that I've got cooked up for this one is Michael Pittman Jr. and Kenneth Walker for Nico Collins and Bill Krosky, aka Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Now, I think the reason why I don't consider Michael Pittman as someone I want to keep is because his target share is really, really minimal on a weekly basis. That being said, is very efficient on all of his work. So I like Michael Pittman Jr., and he's been better in fantasy for the majority of the season than Nico Collins has, and I think that's the reason that you could possibly get this one to work. And then Kenneth Walker, try to move off that split backfield and try to get Bill Krosky. Maybe this will work, maybe it will not work, but everything is worth a try. Because one of the things that I always see in this chat, every time I do this video, is nobody would take that, don't even try it. It's like, well, if you're not going to try it, then that just shows that you have a loser mentality. And when you say we shouldn't try it, you are stupid. So you should try to do this one because you never know what kind of morons you've got in your league until you try it. And I'll also add this. This is just one idea, right? Like, I only have one idea that comes to my head and I put it down in these videos, but I've got 10,000 other ideas that can go into your full team breakdown if you get a full team breakdown with me with a premium subscription at fsroundup.com. What you can do is sign up for that premium subscription, submit your team in an email to me, and I will break that team down for you once your first payment processes at fsroundup.com. Now, I will say this, I've gotten tons more than I expected this year, so I'm a little behind, still working through them. But guys, it is so valuable to get these team breakdowns and also to get access to the waiver wire tool as well, because now is a very pivotal time to use the waiver wire because you don't want to end your season looking like a guy like this.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the third year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
Now, our next trade target that I want to go ahead and get before Week 7 fantasy football is going to be a quarterback. And I think this just requires a philosophy shift in how your team should be rostered. I think you should be trying to target Drake Maye right now. Now, again, this is not necessarily a buy low video. If you look at Drake Maye right now, Drake Maye is not a buy low candidate. He is the quarterback 4 in fantasy football, averaging 21 fantasy points per game. And against the Saints, he's coming off a good performance with 27 fantasy points, his personal best of the season. So this is not, and I repeat, not a buy low video right here. What this is a philosophy switch. Because if you look under the hood with Drake Maye, right, a quarterback 4 on the season through the first 6 weeks indicates that he's had pretty steady play for a significant amount of time. And that would be correct. If you look at the guy's game log, 16.8 points against the Las Vegas Raiders, 26.3 against the Miami Dolphins, 20.2, 23.2, 12.1, and 27.2. He's had one game where it was not ideal to start him, and maybe week 1 wasn't an ideal start either, but that did not kill you. The majority of the time, he's not only been serviceable, he's been winning people weeks based off his performances. And the good thing about this one, and why I like to get Drake Maye and do a complete overhaul of the roster, essentially, we'll go through that here in a minute. The reason I like this one is because of the schedule moving forward. Let's just outline until their bye week, which is in week 14. Tennessee next week, Cleveland the next week, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New York Jets, Cincinnati, and the Giants. Name me a really hard matchup in that one. There really isn't one, maybe besides the Cleveland Browns. This is a winning move, and the guy is still thought of as not as highly as a top 5 quarterback for you to make an overhaul of your roster. So again, not a buy low candidate. You're going to have to pay up, but it will do dividends for your team. I have an idea with Josh Allen and Devontae Adams for Drake Maye and Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jackson Smith and Jigba. This right here is a winning move because you move off of Josh Allen, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, no doubt, and also a very high-profile player that has a lot more name value than Drake Maye does. But the reality is your fantasy points per game, not that much different as far as it is different between Devontae Adams and a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Puka Nacua. This one significantly upgrades your team on a massive scale that it can't be overlooked, and I believe that it is a philosophy switch that you should probably make as a fantasy football manager here, because this upgrades your team by several fantasy points when you factor in the differential of points between each of those options right there. I love trading for Drake Maye right now. If you are going to include a top-tier quarterback, this deal can get done. The next trade target that I want to talk about, there's a window here. It's very small. It might not happen in your league, but there's a window here with Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua, I'm going to be very quick because I think most people understand how great he has been in fantasy this year. But just in case you did not understand how great Puka is in fantasy football this year, he is averaging, with going out early in week 6, 23.1 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. Now, if you just wanted to separate out and say, I want to take out the week where he missed time, he is averaging 26.8 fantasy points in a full PPR format. This guy has 62 targets through 5 weeks of the NFL season, and on the full year, he's still leading the league in targets with 65 through 6 games. Not even 6 games. He played less than half of 6 games. So Puka Nacua is in this position right now where he's the best wide receiver in fantasy football, and it's not particularly close, by the way. And he's also injured right now. So he goes down with an ankle injury on Sunday, briefly returns, doesn't do anything. Then it comes out the report that he is going to miss some time, according to Ian Rappaport. Well, this morning, as of the time of this filming, Sean McVay came out and basically refuted that and said, no, he's day-to-day. Like, if we look at him as a day-to-day guy, he's feeling good right now, but we don't know if he's going to be available. That probably still shows me he'll miss at least 1 week right here. Therefore, there is a small window if you are in a league with someone who's desperate and needs players this week. I believe you can make a trade like Justin Jefferson and Amari Hampton for Puka Nacua and Derrick Henry happen right here. Because essentially what this does here, you trade an injured player for another injured player. Amari Hampton for Puka Nacua. That seems fair to a lot of people, right? Because Amari Hampton, when he gets back, a lot of people will resume playing him as a running back 1 or great RB2. Then you get rid of Justin Jefferson, who will be a problem for the entire year because of bad quarterback play, is someone I'm about to go over, by the way, as a buy low candidate. And let's just go to Derrick Henry as my last buy low, because into last week, I did say to people, listen, there's obviously a problem with Derrick Henry right now. I mean, there's just no escaping it. He's the running back 18 in full PPR formats this year. It's been bad for the Baltimore Ravens as a whole. But there's something about this one that doesn't feel right when people are really panicking on him right now. So I decided to look under the hood last week. And what you can see, and it jumps right off the page to you, is he's still averaging over 5 yards per carry. Now, as of week 6, he's averaging 5 yards per carry exactly. But Derrick Henry, this is my point, is that this guy is not a problem as far as his play goes. The play has not been the issue with Derrick Henry. The team has been the issue. And one thing I've always said about Derrick Henry is he is at his best when his team is in the lead and he's able to bleed the clock. Now this team, without Lamar Jackson, can't do that. So he's been averaging 12.2 fantasy points per game on a bad team right now. Now what happens here is Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens, they head into a bye week in week 7. Then after that bye week, it's been reported, that's when Lamar Jackson returns. And here's their schedule over the next several weeks. The Chicago Bears out of the bye. The Miami Dolphins after that. Minnesota Vikings without a quarterback. Cleveland Browns without a quarterback. The New York Jets, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Cincinnati Bengals again in week 15. This schedule is about to significantly lighten up after the bye week for the Baltimore Ravens, and that's where I believe we start to see Derrick Henry emerge again as a great fantasy option. That's why I liked him in that Puka trade right there, and this is the reason why I like trading Ashton Genty and DK Metcalf for Derrick Henry and Brian Thomas Jr. Listen, let's just line up Ashton Genty and Derrick Henry real quick. Let's just do that really quick for fun. So Derrick Henry, again, averaging 5 yards per carry in fantasy football this year, and he's been in the end zone 4 total times. Now, Ashton Genty's been in the end zone 5 total times, including his 2 reception touchdown week, and he's averaging 4 yards per carry. Now, Ashton Genty is the RB10 versus Derrick Henry being the RB18 in a full PPR format. But the reason I like this one here is because Derrick Henry is on a better team. And I will be willing to say that with the 1-5 Baltimore Ravens. They will get Lamar back and they will start rattling off win after win after win after win. This is going to happen, and I think if you're being logical and having a brain and using it, you will see this as well. They will start to rattle off wins when Lamar comes back, and that's where Derrick Henry is at his best. Ashton Genty, on the other hand, is on a reeling offense that just beat the Tennessee Titans. Y'all freaking who? That's not a big win. They will continue to be bad offensively, so I will always take the running back on the better team versus the running back on the worst team. And Derrick Henry, once again, has not been bad this year. 5 yards per carry, that's not a player that's slowing down. That's a player that's on a bad offense that can't get at the goal line very many times, and he's not been able to execute without the threat of Lamar Jackson on the ground as well. Derrick Henry is a great trade target ahead of week 7. So let me know who you're targeting before week 7 fantasy football, and make sure to stay tuned for tomorrow's kicker and defense rankings.